Hi, this is Chef Matt from the Kansas City Raw Living Sub-Zero Showroom, and today we're going to make some salted caramel ganache fudge brownies. And this is a favorite recipe of mine that I want to show you how to put together, and we're going to use the Wolf M Series oven on convection mode. So we're going to get started with, we've got some butter melting on the range top, and you could do that in the microwave as well, but we want this butter hot enough to melt the chocolate a little bit. And we're doing about 6 ounces. We're going to share the recipe with you as well, link to the recipe, but about 6 ounces of melted butter, and we're going to pour that over the chocolate chips, and the residual heat is going to melt that chocolate. So we're going to stir that chocolate and get it to start to break down into a liquid state. And once we've got that, do you notice that I've got all of my ingredients measured? This just makes a lot of recipes go much smoother if I've already got those measured out. And I've got 4 eggs, I've got a 1.5 cups of sugar. Now the recipe I'm giving you calls for pecans, but you know, today I'm throwing a little twist on it, and I'm gonna do some pistachio brownies instead. And you can play around with walnuts. There's a list of different nuts that you can put in here. And nuts will add some moisture to those brownies on top of them already being a fudge brownie. So lots of flavor as well. So now our chocolate is in a liquid state. Okay, you can see this. And from here, we're gonna start to add our ingredients. So we're gonna start with sugar. Once we add sugar to this mixture, if that mixture is still a little bit warm, we're not in danger of the eggs cooking when we add those to it, because once we've got that sugar in there, our eggs are not going to cook. So next we're going to add in the eggs. And we're going to switch over to a whisk at this point, because we want to get all these ingredients to really come together nice and smooth batter of brownies. So we will stir that next, and let's talk about what kind of chocolate do we want to use when we do a fudge brownie like this. So I'm using Belgian chocolate, or a Belgian style chocolate if you can't find a true Belgian, and I'm doing about a 55% chocolate, so on the darker side, but not necessarily a bittersweet, more considered a semi-sweet. And you'll notice there's actually more of the butter in this recipe than there is the chocolate. We are adding some cocoa now, which is going to really pump up the chocolate flavor, but it's not going to be quite as sweet. We do have some sugar in there already, so we don't need to add a lot of extra sugar to this. So next we're stirring in that cocoa, and this is a nice dark or brut cocoa. And the darker, the better for this recipe, because it really helps pronounce the chocolate flavor when it's finished. Some pure vanilla extract, okay, and a little bit of salt. I use a kosher salt in my recipes. It's nice and flaky and tends to break down okay, but if you've got table salt, then just go ahead and back off to about a 1/4 teaspoon on that. All right, so our batter's nice and smooth at this point. Next, we're going to add in the flour, okay? So we've got a fairly low ratio of flour to this. That's a cup of all-purpose flour, and I sifted it beforehand, so if I had any lumps in there, then the sifter broke those up. So it end up with, what happens is you can end up with little white chunks in your brownies, which is where the batter just didn't get mixed quite enough. So now, we're not in danger of over mixing this because it's such a low ratio of flour. However, it's not something you need to mix for 4 or 5 minutes. Just a minute or two, just till all those ingredients are combined is fine. All right? So about right now, we've got a nice smooth brownie batter. Okay? And we're going to switch over to the rubber spatula again to fold in those nuts. Now, if you're not a person that likes those nuts in the brownies, then just do without, okay? You can back off on your baking time a couple of minutes because they're not going to be quite as large or quite as thick. Now we're going to fold these nuts in just so they're evenly dispersed. And I've preheated my oven on 325 convection, okay? And that's not convection bake. That's straight convection, which the heat's coming from behind the wall in this mode, okay? So no top or bottom elements are involved in heating that. So now we've got a 9x13 pan prepped, and you can do it two ways. You can do the pan spray, and you can also do the butter with some flour. That's a favorite of mine. It really works the best for releasing that brownie. And then I did cut a small piece of some parchment to put in the bottom there. So once I clean the sides with that paring knife when they've cooled off, then I can flip it out and it will actually release really easily, and I can just peel that paper off, okay? So let's go ahead and pour that brownie batter in. Okay, and you'll notice I didn't put any baking soda or baking powder in this. So this fudge brownie style doesn't use a leavener of baking soda or baking powder. The leavener is the eggs recipe. So we're going to get a natural puff on that brownie before it settles, okay? Once it settles back down for about a half hour out of the oven, then we're going to go ahead and top that. So this is going to go in the oven now, our M-series oven, on convection, center of the rack, center of the oven. You could also do this on the E-series oven or on your range oven from Wolf. And so now we're going to let those bake. I have a timer set for 30 minutes, and we'll get that going, and we'll be back. I'm going to take off those, set them out to cool, and about 30 minutes after that, we're going to make a salted caramel ganache that just sets these apart. They're wonderful. They're a staff favorite, a friend, family favorite. I gotta warn you, people will want you to make this regularly if you make these, okay? I gotta warn you. But we'll be right back and we'll make that ganache icing, okay? Thanks. All right, so now we're back. We've cooled off our fudge brownies and we're getting ready to make the ganache icing. And what's special about this ganache icing is that we're using some caramel to melt that chocolate and to make that French fudge, if you will, for the topping. I've got some sugar on the range right here in a little saucepan with just a touch of water just to hydrate it. So it was a half a cup of sugar to just a couple tablespoons of water. And I've been cooking this for just a couple of minutes, and it's hard, and you can bring that to a boil right away. You don't have to do it on lower heat. And I'm starting to get a nice amber color to it. So I don't want to start to add the cream when it's a golden. I want a nice darker color. And that's going to give me a pronounced caramel. So now I've got a really nice mahogany amber color, if you will. And now we've got that half cup of heavy cream coming in. You've got to use heavy cream, otherwise it's not going to be able to withstand the cooking. We need that fat content in that heavy cream. All right. So now we're going to put that back on. Now that those bubbles have subsided just a little bit, and let that cook for just a moment. And we're going to talk about alternative ways to do this brownie as well. I had this pan out earlier and I wanted to show you also making a brownie tart for a dessert is a nice alternative. We're going to cut some squares and some little petit fours out of this pan right here, but also if you're doing a nice dinner party, this batter would actually make a couple of these tart pans right here with removable bottom. So that's another alternative you can use. You'd bake them for the same amount of time. Our brownies ended up being perfect right at that 30-minute mark on the convection 325. All right, so now we're going to turn off that caramel, and I'm going to give it a little bit of a stir just to mix up that sugar and that heavy cream a little bit. All right, so you can see it's kind of hard to see right now, but I will try and tilt it and show you the color on that. Okay, so a nice dark amber color. And we're going to retire the whisk for a moment, and we're going to scrape that mixture over the chocolate and let that chocolate, this is more than plenty hot enough to melt that chocolate, and we're going to start to stir it right away so that we can get it nice and smooth. All right, so be very careful, don't splash it up on your hand because that is extremely hot. Okay, and we're going to just put a very light pinch of the sea salt into the bowl while we're mixing it up, okay? And then we're going to also add a little bit of butter into that, okay? couple of tablespoons of butter. It's going to give it a really nice creamy mouthfeel. And finishing a caramel with butter is also a very nice way to add some flavor to that. So now we are nice and smooth and shiny and ready to pour this over. Now I like to do this while the brownies are still warm out of the oven, about a half hour to an hour. And from there, if you didn't do parchment underneath those brownies when we poured the batter in, if it's just some pan spray or the butter and flour, and you plan on cutting them out of there, then you can just pour it like this if so, okay? I'm going to actually invert the brownies so that we can actually use this as the bottom and we have a really nice perfect surface for the other, okay? So we're gonna take a parchment lined sheet pan and we're gonna hold it like this, and we're just gonna flip it. And I just heard it release. And let's pull that off. So now we've got 9 by 13 we can set to the side. I did go around that before we started the video, just to release it with the paring knife from the edges. And now we're going to peel up the parchment off of that brownie. Okay, and if it starts to tear from one end, you can just go to the other end and start from that one. Really easy to peel that back. And what this gives us is a really perfect surface to work with. This is what they do with a lot of pastries and cakes whenever they're pulling those and getting ready to ice those. All right, so now we're going to pour that chocolate out onto the brownies. All right, and from there we'll set that aside. I've got a footed spatula that we're going to simply smear this around a little bit. We're not going to overwork it because I want to keep that shine on the ganache. And the more I work it, the more I'm going to start to cool it off, and it's going to leave some work marks, if you will. So we're just kind of working this around. You get it to drape over the edges a little bit. All right, just like so. And then once more, up and down. If you're a perfectionist and you want it perfectly flat, you can do 2 swipes like that, okay? From there, we'll set this aside, and to finish it, at this stage, we want to sprinkle a little bit of the really large flaky sea salt. I use Malden salt, and it's a very large flake, and I'm just going to sprinkle that in right now, and with that ganache still warm, it's going to basically glue it to that, okay? So I don't go crazy with this, but just that little bit of flake salt on there makes a really nice crunch factor on top, and that salt just really pops really nicely with that dark caramel, okay? So thank you for tuning in today. Please see Roth Living's YouTube channel, or also visit us on Instagram, Roth Living Lifestyles, and we hope to see you in one of our showrooms soon. Thanks a lot.